Dawn rose slow over Redstone Creek Ranch, the kind of thick Texas morning where the heat seemed to hum beneath the soil long before the sun fully crested the horizon. The land sprawled in golden stretches, cattle shifting like dark waves, dust curling off the earth in lazy spirals, barns standing like weather-beaten sentinels. It was beautiful in a way that was harsh, honest, and utterly indifferent to the people who worked it. Wyatt Cain belonged to that indifference, or at least he pretended he did. He rode through the front gates with his usual swagger, shoulders squared, hat tipped low enough to hide the shadow beneath his storm-gray eyes. His stallion moved with purpose, hooves striking the ground like punctuation. He smelled faintly of whiskey, smoke, and a night spent in places respectable men pretended not to know. Any ranch hand who crossed his path dipped his head and stepped aside. Wyatt wasn't just the boss, he was a force, a rumor, a warning wrapped in broad shoulders and a dangerous smile. He feared nothing, not fists, not bullets, not God's judgment. That morning, however, something unexpected caught his eye. A woman's voice, sharp and frustrated, cut through the air from the far edge of the property. "Move, now! I swear, you thick-headed beast, I ain't in the mood today." Wyatt turned his head toward the pigsty, the filthiest corner of Redstone Creek, the place even seasoned ranch hands avoided when they could. Mud clung to everything there. The smell hit a man before he reached the gate. The pens were a chaos of squeals, sloshing muck, and stubborn animals who cared nothing for the dignity of the humans feeding them. And in the center of it, knee-deep in mire, stood Elena Rivera. Her back was strong, her hips full and steady, her dark skin glistening under the early light. Sweat traced down her temple as she wrestled a sack of feed half her size. Her curls, thick and coiled, were tied back by a frayed ribbon that had clearly fought its own battles. Her dress was patched enough to be more thread than fabric, but she moved with the kind of authority that didn't belong to rags. As she watched, a massive hog rammed its snout into her leg, knocking her off balance. She fell to one knee, mud splashing up her arms and across her cheek. For a heartbeat, he expected her to cry out or curse the animal to hell. But she didn't. She planted her feet deeper into the muck and pushed herself upright with the slow, deliberate strength of someone who had been fighting her whole life and refused to surrender now. Her jaw set, her eyes, deep, brown, and burning, flashed with a fire so bright it seemed to challenge the entire ranch. Wyatt felt something in his chest hitch, a strange, unwelcome sensation. He leaned against the wooden fence, letting a smirk slide onto his lips. "Well now," he drawled, voice thick with amusement. "Didn't know Redstone Creek hired women who could wrestle hogs before breakfast." Elena froze, her hand stilled on the feed sack. Slowly she turned her head toward him. Sunlight hit her cheek, illuminating the streak of mud across her dark skin, the slight tremble in her breath, the stubborn lift of her chin. And she spoke, steady, unshaken. "Some of us don't have the luxury of sleeping off whiskey in a feather bed, Mr. Cain." Behind him, the ranch hand sucked in sharp breaths. A few exchanged looks that said, "She's dead. No one talks to him like that. Lord have mercy." But Wyatt didn't feel anger rise in him, no heat, no sting to his pride. Instead, intrigue. He straightened slowly, smirk deepening. "You got a tongue on you," he warned, stepping closer. "Careful with it." Elena wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, leaving a darker smear. She didn't shrink, didn't bow her head, didn't mutter an apology like every other soul on the ranch. She took one bold, muddy step closer to the fence. "And you," she said, voice a soft challenge, "might try remembering people's names instead of insulting them. My name is Elena. You'll use that if you're going to talk to me." The air shifted. Not a breeze, not the scent of livestock or morning dust. Something else, something tighter, sharper, like the moment before lightning strikes. Wyatt stared at her. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what the hell to say. Then he chuckled. Not mockingly, not cruelly, a real startled laugh that slipped out before he could cage it. "Well," he murmured, tipping his hat, "looks like the pigs ain't the only ones with bite today." He walked away before the ranch hands could see the flicker of bewilderment in his eyes. Elena watched him leave, jaw tight, heart pounding harder than she'd ever admit. She had seen Wyatt Cain before, everyone had, but seeing him close, seeing the smirk, the swagger, the way he looked at her like she wasn't invisible, it unsettled her. She hated that. She returned to her work with more force than finesse, shoveling mud like it had personally offended her. Wyatt didn't shake her image from his mind. Not during the ride to the cattle fields, not while snapping orders at the men. Not even later that night, when whiskey burned down his throat and a saloon girl pressed her lips to his jaw. He should have been lost in pleasure, in alcohol haze, in the same empty comforts he always chased. Instead, he kept thinking of a curvy, mud-streaked farm girl who looked him in the eye without fear. A woman who didn't bow. A woman with fire enough to burn him if he got too close. He feared nothing, but something about Elena Rivera made his heart feel dangerous, and Wyatt Cain never ignored danger.
The next morning broke hotter than the last, the kind of heat that settled early and promised misery by noon. Redstone Creek Ranch stirred awake with groans, scraping boots, and the metallic clatter of buckets. Dust rose in thin veils across the yard. Somewhere, a horse kicked at its stall door, impatient with the thick air. Elena Rivera was already at the pig pens, sleeves pushed to her elbows, the hem of her skirt tied in a knot to keep the mud from swallowing it whole. Sweat shone along her dark skin, catching the golden light. Her shoulders moved with steady rhythm. Dig, lift, toss. The mud sucked at her boots with every step. Hogs snorted, rooting around in the sloshing muck. It was a brutal job, thankless and invisible. But Elena did it with her jaw set, her chest rising and falling in determined cadence. She didn't hear Wyatt Cain approach, not at first. He moved quietly when he wanted to. A large man, sure-footed, deliberate. Boots crunching gravel, spurs clinking lightly. He stopped beside the fence, elbows resting on the rail, hat tipped low. There was something different in his posture. Not the sharp swagger he wore like armor, but a slower, assessing stillness. "You do this every day?" he asked. Elena didn't turn, didn't pause her work. "No," she said, voice dry as dust. "Only on the days I want to smell like hogs." A corner of Wyatt's mouth lifted. Sharp tongue again. "Sharp enough," she muttered, "to cut through nonsense." Wyatt chuckled, low and rough. The sound drifted across the pen and brushed her spine with unwelcome awareness. She hated that he could affect her without even stepping inside the mud. But he didn't leave. He watched her work, watched the way her hips shifted for balance, the strength in her arms, the curve of her back as she threw the shovel. She was not delicate. She was not pretending. She was real, and that truth was more striking than anything he'd found in a saloon. Elena felt his eyes on her like heat. It made her movement stiffer, sharper. "Don't you have real work to do?" she asked, without looking up. "Probably," he said, shrugging one shoulder. "But none of it smells half as interesting as this place." She spun then, shovel pausing midair, eyes narrowed at him. "You're impossible." "Been called that, usually by people who end up liking me anyway." Her eyes flashed. "I won't be one of them." His smirk deepened, not mocking, just intrigued. "We'll see." Before she could fire back, a squeal ripped through the air.
One of the large hogs, mean-tempered and quick, burst through a half-secured gate, charging forward in a blur of bristles and mass. Elena turned too late. Her foot slipped in the mud, heel skidding. The ground tilted under her, and the bucket she carried sloshed violently. She was falling. Then, strong arms wrapped around her waist. Wyatt vaulted the fence like he had been born to cross barriers. Boots sank deep into the muck as he caught her, pulling her out of the hog's path. They crashed into the mud together, bodies colliding, a splash of cold muck drenching them both. Elena gasped, palms pressing instinctively against his chest. Wyatt's arms held her firmly, as if the ranch would burn around them before he let her go. The hog barreled past, snorting, disappearing out toward the field. Nobody moved. For one breath, maybe two, the world narrowed to the soft thud of Elena's heartbeat against his chest and the thick silence that swallowed the rest of the ranch. "Easy," Wyatt murmured, voice close enough that she felt it on her cheek. She lifted her gaze. Storm-gray eyes met deep brown ones, and for the first time there was nothing guarded in his expression, no swagger, no arrogance, but raw, unmasked concern. "You all right?" he asked, his voice softened to sanded edges. "Yes, I'm fine." Wyatt sat up slowly, guiding her with him. Mud covered his shirt, streaked across his jaw, clung to his arms. He didn't seem to notice any of it. His attention was wholly on her, on the rapid rise and fall of her chest, the fear she tried to hide, the fire still stubborn in her eyes. Without thinking, his thumb brushed a smear of mud from her cheek. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. Elena's breath hitched. She slapped his hand away, scrambling to her feet as quickly as the mud allowed. Her cheeks burned, not with embarrassment, but with the terrifying awareness of what his touch had done to her. "Don't think saving me once changes anything," she said, voice shaking despite her best effort. "I still don't trust you." Wyatt rose to his full height, mud dripping from his clothes. He towered over her, but there was no intimidation in his posture, only honesty and something else, something he didn't yet know how to name. "I reckon you shouldn't trust me, but I reckon one day you will." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She hated that he sounded so certain. She hated more that a small, traitorous part of her wondered if he was right. Elena turned away quickly, grabbing the fallen bucket and forcing herself back into motion. Work steadied her. Work she understood. Men like Wyatt Cain, she had no tools for them. But as Wyatt watched her retreat into the mud, something inside him shifted. Quiet, steady, unsettling. He had met stubborn before. Pride, defiance, anger. He lived in those things himself. But Elena Rivera wasn't stubborn out of ego. She was stubborn out of survival. Her fire was not for show. It was her shield. And for the first time in his life, Wyatt Cain wanted not to break a woman's defenses, but to earn the right to be let past them. He stood there long after she disappeared into the far pen, the smell of mud clinging to him, a strange weight settling in his chest. He feared nothing, but he feared walking away from her, and that was new. Summer thickened over Redstone Creek like a weighted blanket, pressing heat into every board, every breath. Tempers ran short. Pigs squealed louder. Cattle kicked at invisible flies. Even the wind seemed irritated, swiping through the pastures in hot, impatient gusts. Elena Rivera worked through all of it, her arms slick with sweat, her curls sticking stubbornly to her temples despite their tight twist beneath her scarf. She didn't complain, she didn't stop, she didn't look up when Wyatt Cain passed, though she always felt him. It was impossible not to notice him, broad, imposing, moving across the ranch with the sort of authority that made men straighten their backs. But that week, something was different in the way he appeared at the pig pens. He came more often. He lingered longer. He asked questions that had nothing to do with hogs or mud. And Elena, despite her determination to ignore him, felt the shift like a hand pressing gently against her ribs. This afternoon, she was bent over a trough, scrubbing soot-stained wood. The remnants of the fire that had scorched the barn days earlier still clung stubbornly to her chores. Caleb Dorsey's men had denied involvement, but rumors slipped through town like smoke through cracks. Rumors that Wyatt had enemies circling in the hills. She didn't fear the men in the dark. She feared the part of herself that cared whether he returned home from wherever he rode each night. Bootsteps crunched behind her. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Wyatt said, voice dipping into the shadow of evening. Her hand tightened around the brush. "I can handle myself." "That ain't the point." He stepped closer. She could feel the heat radiating from him even with her back turned. Ash stained the fold of his sleeve, but his eyes held a weight she hadn't seen before. A warning, a worry, a tether unspoken. "You think they'd come after me?" she asked, voice low. "I think," Wyatt said, stepping close enough that the dust between them shifted, "that anyone tied to this ranch is in danger. And whether you like it or not," his jaw tightened, "you're tied to it now." Elena felt the words like the slow slide of a knife beneath her skin, sharp but undeniable. She looked away, focusing on the half-clean trough to keep her heart from tripping over itself. "I didn't ask to be tied to anything." Wyatt huffed a soft laugh, but it wasn't his usual arrogant sound. It held something quieter, something human. "Believe me, darlin', I didn't ask for this either." Her pulse stuttered. A breeze carried the faint scent of wood smoke between them. And then a sound sliced through the night. A scream, followed by shouting, followed by the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Elena jerked upright. Wyatt reacted instantly, revolver drawn, posture shifting from concern to deadly in a single breath. "Stay behind me." But Elena didn't move. Couldn't, because fear, cold and sudden, wrapped its fingers around her spine. "Wyatt!" Another shot tore through the stillness, shattering glass somewhere near the bunkhouse. Men yelled. Horses bucked against their reins. The ranch exploded into chaos. Wyatt grabbed her wrist. "Get to the main house. Now!" "No!" Elena yanked her arm free, stepping toward the yard. "I'm not running while everyone else fights." He pivoted, anger flashing, not from ego, but fear. Real fear. "Damn it, Elena, you think I can stop bullets and worry about you at the same time?" His voice cracked, just barely. "I need you safe." The words punched through her. Wyatt Cain, legendary, untouchable, unstoppable, was afraid. For her. Before she could reply, the dirt beside them erupted in a spray of dust, another bullet, close enough to feel its heat in the air. Wyatt swore, grabbed her and threw them both to the ground, shielding her body with his own. For a heartbeat they were pressed together, his chest against her back, his breath hot against her ear, his arms braced around her. "Wyatt," she whispered, not sure what she meant to say. He looked down at her, eyes wild with adrenaline and something deeper, raw. "Stay down. Stay with me." Footsteps thundered across the yard, men running, shouting orders, returning fire. The ranch had become a battleground. A voice rose above it all, distant but unmistakable. "Cain, you can't protect what ain't yours. Hand over the land or burn with it." Caleb Dorsey. Elena froze, heart hammering. Wyatt knew exactly who had come to finish the job, and he wasn't backing down. He grabbed Elena's hand, pulled her to her feet. "Get inside and bar the door." Her fingers tightened around his. "No, I won't stay hidden while you face this alone." "Elena, I mean it." A long, breathless moment stretched between them, gunfire like thunder, smoke drifting low, the air thick with fear and meaning that neither had dared to speak before. Wyatt exhaled shakily, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one walking away from danger. He was walking toward it, because she was there, because she mattered, because something inside him had already chosen her. "Then stay close," he said finally, voice soft but steady, "and you don't dare let go." The night swallowed them both as they moved toward the gunfire, side by side, bound by something neither could deny anymore. A storm meeting its equal. Gunfire split the night in jagged bursts, each echo ricocheting against the hills like distant thunder trapped in a valley. Smoke swirled low along the ground, carrying the scent of burning timber and hot metal. Lanterns flickered wildly in the yard, shadows leaping across the barn ruins, across the panic-struck livestock, across the faces of the men who worked Redstone Creek Ranch and now fought for it. Wyatt Cain moved through the chaos like a storm given human shape, fast, precise, unyielding. His revolver cracked the air with a practiced rhythm, each shot sharp and controlled. Men shouted his name for orders, and he answered with the kind of authority born not from ego, but from expectation. For years, Wyatt had demanded obedience. Tonight, he earned trust. But even as he fired into the dark, even as he barked commands, one thought pressed through every heartbeat. Where is Elena? He told her to stay back, ordered her even. But Wyatt Cain knew better than to expect obedience from a woman who carried fire in her chest. Elena Rivera obeyed no man, not fear, not danger, not him. And because of that, dread gnawed at him. The ranch hands scrambled toward the main gate, rifles raised, voices strained. Caleb Dorsey's men charged from the ridge, torches waving like crazed fireflies. They came with intent, to take the land, to break Wyatt, to prove that even a feared man could be cornered. Wyatt wasn't cornered. He was enraged. Another round cracked the air and he ducked behind a water trough, reloading with quick, practiced hands. Sweat streaked down his temple, mixing with soot. His muscles burned. Adrenaline pushed him forward. Then, through the haze, he saw movement. A figure running towards him. Small, fast, determined. Dress torn. Hair wild. Eyes blazing. Elena. His heart dropped and surged at once. "Damn it!" Wyatt shoved off the trough and sprinted towards her. A bullet hissed past them. Another struck the ground near his boot. He didn't stop. He grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover, breath harsh, fear barely contained. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked, voice trembling around the edges. Elena's chest heaved with effort. Soot streaked across her cheek, sweat glistening on her dark skin beneath the lantern glow. In her hands, dirty, trembling, was a shotgun. One of the ranch hands must have dropped it. "I told you," she said, voice shaking, but fierce. "I won't hide while everyone else fights." Wyatt grabbed her shoulders, fingers digging in. "Elena, you could get killed. And what about you? You think I'd just sit inside listening to gunfire, wondering if I'd ever see you walk back through that door?" He froze. The world stilled around them. The gunshots, the shouting, the chaos muffled beneath the pounding of two hearts laid bare. Soft lantern light caught her face and reflected in her eyes, turning fear into something deeper. Something he recognized, something he hadn't dared to name. Her breath trembled. "Wyatt, if you die out there—" A sound broke her voice. He felt something inside himself crack. "Elena!" His voice was hoarse, scraped raw by more than smoke. Another bullet tore through the night, slamming into the wooden post inches above their heads. Instinct took over. Wyatt threw himself forward, covering her body with his. Elena gasped as his weight pressed her into the dirt, warmth radiating through his sweat-soaked shirt. His hand braced near her head, shielding her from splintered wood. For a heartbeat, just one, everything else went quiet. His breath brushed her cheek. Her fingers curled into his vest without meaning to. The world shrunk to the space between them. He lifted his head just enough to meet her gaze, and she saw it. The panic, the fury, the truth. He loved her. It wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. It was written in every line of his face, every trembling breath, every moment he'd spent worrying for her. "Elena," he whispered, as if the word were a vow.
Stay with me." Her hand rose, almost without permission, and cupped his cheek. Her thumb brushed ash from his skin. "Not if you don't stay with me." A slight tremor moved through his body. Then, the space between them vanished. His mouth crashed against hers in a kiss fierce enough to silence the world around them. It was not gentle. It was not pretty. It was desperate, born of fear, longing, and the terrifying realization that something bigger than either of them had rooted itself deep and unstoppable. When they broke apart, breathless, Wyatt lifted his revolver again, and now he didn't move like a man defending land. He moved like a man defending her. The battle raged until the sky began to pale at the edges, torches dying out as enemy men fled back into the hills. One by one, the shouts quieted, the ranch settling into exhausted stillness. When Caleb himself staggered into view, hatred twisting his face, it was Elena's shotgun that fired first, dropping him to the dirt and ending the fight. The ranch hands erupted in shouts of victory. Wyatt didn't hear them. His eyes were on Elena, on the trembling in her hands, the exhaustion hollowing her breath, the stubborn fire still burning in her gaze. He crossed the dirt yard towards her, ignoring the blood dripping from his arm, and framed her face with both hands. "You saved me," he murmured, voice breaking. "You saved me first," she whispered back. Smoke drifted between them like the last breath of the long night, but the warmth rising in Wyatt's chest, the way Elena leaned into his touch, and the quiet electricity in the air, those were the things that would leave marks deeper than any gunshot.
Morning crept softly over Redstone Creek Ranch, the sun rising slow and golden as if afraid to disturb the fragile quiet settling over the land. Smoke still curled from the blackened remains of the barn, drifting into the cool air in thin, tired ribbons. The ground was littered with spent bullet casings and boot prints. The dirt churned from the chaos of the night before. But the worst was over. The men were alive. The herd still stood. The ranch, though scarred, endured. And Wyatt Cain, bloody, bruised, exhausted, was still standing. He leaned against a fence post, watching the ranch hands haul water to dampen the remaining embers. His arm throbbed from where a bullet had grazed him. His knuckles were scraped. His voice was raw from shouting commands, curses, and prayers he'd never would have admitted to saying aloud. But beneath all that pain and weariness, one thought pulsed steady in his mind. Elena is safe. He scanned the yard until he found her, sitting on an overturned bucket near the well. Her dress was torn, streaked with soot. Her curls were wild from smoke, heat, and fear. Her skin glowed warm under the rising sun, though fatigue weighed heavy on her shoulders. She held her shotgun loosely across her lap, fingers resting on the barrel as if unsure whether to release it yet. The weapon looked too big for her hands, too heavy for her frame. But she had wielded it with the strength and precision of someone who refused to let fear choose her fate. Wyatt's chest tightened. He walked toward her slowly, boots crunching over charred debris. Elena lifted her gaze, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding carved from fire, danger, and the truth they could no longer ignore. When he reached her, she didn't rise. She simply looked at him with an expression he hadn't earned before now. Respect. Worry. Something softer. He crouched in front of her, ignoring the flare of pain in his arm. "You hurt anywhere?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just tired." Her voice was hoarse, sanded down from smoke and heat. Wyatt nodded, swallowing. "You did good last night." Elena looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor there. "I killed a man. I didn't want to, but I did," she whispered. He reached out,
hesitation flickering for only a second before his fingers brushed her knee. "You didn't kill him. You protected us. Protected this ranch. Protected me." His voice dropped, rough with sincerity. Her eyes lifted, glossy at the edges. "I was scared." "I know." His thumb stroked gently across her knee, grounding both of them. It startled her, those words coming from him. Wyatt Cain didn't fear things. He didn't admit weakness. He didn't confess. But there he was, kneeling in soot, ash on his skin, finally unmasked. Elena's breath caught, and slowly, almost shyly, she reached up and touched the side of his face. He leaned into it, just slightly, just enough to show he wasn't the man he'd been before the fire. "You're different today," she murmured. He huffed a quiet laugh. "Last night tends to change a man." Her thumb traced the rough line of stubble along his cheek. "And what exactly did it change?" Wyatt's eyes held hers, steady, storm gray, softened. "It made me realize what I can't lose." The words struck her heavy and warm. He took her hand gently, lowering it from his face, but not letting go. Their fingers intertwined, dark skin against weathered tan, soot staining both. "Elena Rivera," he said, voice low, "I ain't ever cared this much about anything. Not land, not cattle, not even my own damn pride." Her heart slammed loud enough she swore he could hear it. "I've been running from something for years. Didn't know what it was till last night. It was loneliness, and I'm done running." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, gentle and terrifying all at once. She opened her mouth to speak, but Wyatt lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against the back of her fingers. "Stay," he whispered. She blinked. "Stay? Here." His other hand rose, cupping her cheek with a tenderness she had never expected from him. "With me." Her breath trembled. The sun warmed her shoulders. The ranch around them stirred slowly back to life. Quiet laughter, murmured prayers, the clatter of tools. But everything felt suspended between them. "Elena," she whispered, "I don't know how to be what you think you need." He shook his head. "I ain't asking you to be anything but yourself. Your fire, your stubbornness, your strength. You showed me what matters. You showed me what a real life could look like." Her gaze softened, the fear in it loosening with each word he spoke. "And if you'll let me," Wyatt said, voice dipping softer, "I want to build that life with you. Slow, honest, real." Her throat tightened. He wasn't promising perfection. He wasn't offering a fairy tale. He was offering effort, vulnerability, change, everything she'd never dared hope for. Elena leaned forward until her forehead rested against us. His breath mingled with hers, warm and steady. They stayed like that, quiet, connected, the world around them fading into a landscape of possibility. Finally, her fingers curled around his, firm and sure. "I'll stay," she whispered. Wyatt exhaled, a shuddering, relieved breath, as if the weight of years dropped off his shoulders in an instant. He stood slowly, pulling her up with him. She steadied herself on his chest. He kept her hand in his, refusing to let go. The ranch had survived the night, but something else had been born in its ashes. A partnership, a promise, a love grounded not in fancy, but in fire and grit. Elena looked out over the sprawling land that had nearly taken everything from her and given her more than she expected. Wyatt only looked at her. "It starts today," he murmured. She smiled, small, real, glowing in the new morning light. "Then let us begin."